Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 4 of the Infinite Game Book Club. Welcome to people from around the world: Canada, Melbourne, Australia, Brazil, Israel, Dubai, El Paso, Texas. I just love it. I just love how many people come from all over the place. We are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Remember, the whole point of book club is not about this. It's not even about reading a book. It's that we're doing something together. COVID has separated us, and the whole idea is that we read the book with at least one other person. It's about the cooperation, not about the book. But here we are. We get to get together ourselves. Nigeria, Seattle, Panama. Man, I love it. Romania, Spain, India. Whoa, you guys are overwhelming it. London, Sweden. This is insane. Everybody's typing in their thing. It's an explosion of countries. It's absolutely wonderful. Netherlands, Jordan, Sacramento. Welcome, 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 everyone. Good to see you all. Thank you for emailing in your questions and your book club photos. We love looking at them. Welcoming to the group, the Y International, is it International Europe branch book club, who meet directly following these live sessions. So Aisha, Barbara, Massimo, Jules, Diana, keep it up. Thanks for being a part of it. We have the No Stress Book Club in Atlanta, Georgia. I appreciate the optimism. And of course, the Dakota Potato Peel and Pie Literary Society. We saw your book club photo as well. Thanks for sending it in. We love it. Your consistency of showing up to every book club live is really heartening. And I just like saying Dakota Potato Peel Pie and Literary Society. I want to know where all that comes from. Today we are covering chapters 8 and 9. Where's my book? Here it is. All tabbed up because I said things that I found interesting. Ethical fading and worthy rival. And we'll look at questions in a little bit. So ethical fading, when I stumbled upon ethical fading, I can tell you exactly how I found it. I was attending a conference. It was actually a DoD conference, and a gentleman by the name of Dr. Lenny Wong gave a presentation, and he talked about his findings about finding ethical lapses and ethical fading in the Army. I actually wrote about Lenny Wong in the book. I reached out to him a couple years after I heard him speak and said, that stuff that you said stuck with me, and I want to know more about ethical fading. Tell me about ethical fading. And the thing that I find so astonishing about it is just, I talked about a couple of extreme examples. I talked about myelin in pharmaceutical, and I talked about Wells Fargo. What I find so upsetting, and we saw it, I hate to say it, but this is so rampant, that when challenged with ethical questions, CEOs of large companies, their pat answer is, we did nothing illegal. Myelin, who raised, and like so many other pharmaceuticals, I highlighted one, but it's so common, when they have a patent for an essential drug, and they can't help themselves, they raise the price of that drug 100%, 200%, 300%, 500%, 1,000%. And when criticized, they all say the same thing: we did nothing illegal. Yes, but it's unethical. It's unethical. It makes us feel uncomfortable. We all have a sense that it's wrong and unfair, even if the law doesn't account for it. We saw it happen just this week. We saw the CEOs of Facebook and Google and Amazon and Apple show up and testify in front of Congress about a behavior that looks like monopoly behavior, where they keep down competition, where they undermine things. They have control over too much of the marketplace. And what was the pat answer from every single one of them? We are within the bounds of the law. We did nothing illegal. And this is what makes me so uncomfortable. We wouldn't be dragging CEOs in front of congressional panels if they only broke the law. We'd have lawyers for that. We have attorney generals for that. And so this is actually more rampant. Ethical fading is more rampant than we give credit. It doesn't always have to end in scandal. It's really about, these are cultural issues. And so many of these cultural issues are brought on, unfortunately, by failures of leadership. That the incentive structures that we have are completely lopsided to push people, encourage people, incentivize behavior that is more likely to lead to these ethical lapses. And I highlighted just some of the things in the book that we know exist. The overuse of euphemisms. I get a kick out of this. It's like, no company will ever admit that it spies on its customers, but they love data mining. The fact that we refer to human beings as data points means that when we engage with these euphemisms, we're able to sort of disconnect ourselves from the decisions we make and the impact those decisions have, right? We can just push it away. There's a dehumanizing of these things and of our actions. All of these self-deceptions that help ethical fading happen are an ability that we have, all of us, to push away and distance ourselves from our decisions. When we speak in different pronouns, even, you know how it is when you're under stress and you do unethical things. We're using the pronoun you as opposed to I. I was under stress and I did something unethical, as opposed to, people do unethical things. People do unethical things. I did something unethical. Ethical lapses happen. We are all guilty of ethical lapses for any number of reasons, whether it was bouts of selfishness, whether it was rationalizing, whether it was stress, whatever it is, that's fine. That happens. And as long as we take accountability for those lapses and we take responsibility for the impact that they have, it's okay. It's about personal growth. We're all trying to be better versions. Ethical fading specifically is when these ethical lapses become systemic and institutionalized across a culture where unethical behavior becomes normalized. And that is very scary. And unfortunately, I think we live in a I mean, I can speak for our nation, where we've gotten so good at the finite game ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall, and which was covered in the later chapter of Worthy Rivals, how at least for our nation, had this false belief that we'd won. And so we've seen finite thinking really take grasp of our nation to the point where I think it significantly contributes to the division that we have, and the fact that everything's become so binary. If I'm right, you have to be wrong. It's very finite-minded thinking, right? Win, lose. Those are the only two stakes. Everything is zero sum. So it was really, really interesting for me to reread this. And again, we're all subject to stress. I cannot stress that enough, which is why healthy cultures are ones in which not only can we announce that I'm struggling, but someone can recognize that we're struggling and come to our aid. And where is this more clearly articulated or exhibited in the example of the Good Samaritan story I told from the early 70s that was done at Princeton. And the statistics are absolutely astonishing. I'll read them to you. If you remember the Good Samaritan story, these were seminary students who the scientists, the study, they put pressure on them, tell them they had to be across campus for some presentation, and they put varying degrees of stress on them, like, yeah, just get over there, don't worry, take your time. Another one's like, they need you, get over there. So different groups. When there was low pressure applied, 63% of the students stopped to help the injured man who was an actor on the side of the street. With medium pressure, 45% stopped to lend assistance. And under high pressure, only 10% of students stopped to help someone in apparent distress. These are seminary students. These are people who pride themselves on their willingness and desire to give to their fellow human being, and only 10% of them under extreme pressure stopped to help someone in apparent need. Now apply that to the rest of us. If you think about the extreme pressure that so many of us are under on a daily basis, that probably 10% or fewer of us will do the right thing. This is why stress is really an important thing. This is why managing stress, dealing with stress, knowing how to identify stress and call it out, because the percentages simply go up when the stress of meet the numbers at the end of the year, otherwise you're going to get fired. Goals are fine, objectives are fine, giving people targets are fine. It's the fear that goes along. If you miss these numbers, what's going to happen, the unbelievable stress it puts on us, the numbers dramatically increase of our ability as good human beings to, if not do something unethical, at least not to do the right thing. So I found this so powerful. And if that's not an argument enough as to why we need to find more balanced metrics. And I think this is an amazing opportunity for anybody who's out there who's entrepreneurially minded. There's an amazing opportunity to introduce new metrics to the marketplace. There's nothing wrong with the traditional metrics. I cannot stress this enough. I'm not against traditional metrics. I'm not against numbers. They're perfectly fine. The point is that they're unbalanced. The point is the stress that we put under is unbalanced. We reward people only for the result that they achieve, but we don't consider how they get that result. And so if you're entrepreneurially minded, try to find new ways to add new metrics. How do we measure the how? How do we measure how you get there? The manner in which you conduct yourself, trust, things like that. I think there's an amazing opportunity to help companies, because even well-intentioned companies, remember, companies that do bad things aren't always bad people. Sometimes it's the environment they're in. So if we can help companies by giving them more balanced metrics, then hopefully we can help them all act more ethically. The other thing that I love about Dr. Wong's work is our knee-jerk reaction when something bad does happen, we want to fix it with process. That sometimes is important, but I think we over-rely and overly believe that applying a process fixes a cultural problem. We're going through it right now. We're watching it happen right now live with the Black Lives Matter movement, which is process will not fix the challenges that many policing organizations face. There's a cultural issue in many of these policing organizations. There are leadership issues. And simply applying a process, which a lot of politicians are keen to do because it makes them look good for their constituents for the next election, look what I did, will have short-term or superficial results. And really, if we want to fix these problems, we have to get under the hood, get in there and look at the leadership and cultural challenges, which sometimes are a little longer to solve, which make people uncomfortable. This is, again, finite versus infinite. Finite-mindedness wants to see immediate results by this deadline. But when you're dealing with human being stuff, that's just not how it works. Like, you cannot tell your child, you have to learn to ride a bicycle by this date. Otherwise, we're putting you up for adoption. No kid of mine won't ride a bicycle. Of course not. There's a process, and you go through that process. And some learn to ride the bike quickly, and some learn to ride it slowly. But if we go through the process, 100% of children can learn to ride a bicycle. It's the same for behavioral issues. If a kid is acting up, parenting is a process, and sometimes they react to coaching and conversations and tell me about your feelings quickly, and sometimes it's slowly. But if we stick with it, we see results. So we see it with our own children. We see it in ourselves. We see it with our friends. So why do we think it will be different just because it's inside an organization? Cultural problems, people problems require helping people. That's what it is. Counterintuitive and frustrating for some, especially when we want to see immediate results. So ethical fading, I'm so fascinated by it. And unfortunately, it's so pervasive. Worthy rival, the concept of worthy rival came about because of the very real experience that I wrote about, this experience I had with Adam Grant. I was able to look back at myself and how I thought about this person, that he's a nice guy, why I had such an irrational feeling towards him. And I realized it was all about me. And the funny thing is, Adam and I have talked about it since, over the phone, and he was lovely. And he admitted to me, things that he did, to not undermine me, but like he could have helped me, but didn't. And like, we had this very open and honest conversation about it's because we made each other insecure. And I just think it's so funny how it was mutual. It doesn't always have to be mutual. Not all worthy rivals are mutual, but in this case, especially because it's an interpersonal one, it was. But it was such a cathartic experience to talk about it. He and I are now good friends and talk all the time and help each other and promote each other. I mentioned Adam's name in this book because I genuinely want people to read his work. He actually read the manuscript and gave me some input and feedback on the manuscript before I sent it out. So we now ask each other for advice, which is great. Turns out people can buy more than one book as well. But this idea of worthy rival, the most important thing about it, be they organizations or be it about individuals, the whole point of a worthy rival is self-improvement. Remember, the ultimate goal of infinite mindedness is self-improvement. So as an individual, if we choose to go through life with an infinite mindset, it means every single day we try and be better versions of ourselves. We all make mistakes. We've done uncomfortable things, and we just have to take account for them. That's all. It goes back to like the responsibility of business, which is we can live our lives however we want. We just take responsibility for our actions. That's all it means. There's an accounting. But this idea of worthy rival is not about beating another organization, but about upping our own game. And the organizations that are able to do that get better and better and better. I contend, amongst other things, that one of the reasons Apple stayed so far ahead of its competitors for so many years, especially in the Steve Jobs days, is because of their ability to pick out other companies and create these rivalries. And they've gone through multiples of them. They never declared themselves the winners. They never said, we won. When one of the players dropped out of the game, they found another one to pace against. And as a result, they went into this intense self-improvement. So when Microsoft is building a better Nano, or whatever they were doing, Nano is an Apple product. What's it called? The Zune, sorry. When Microsoft was trying to build a better Zune, Apple didn't even care. They were off building the iPhone. In other words, constant self-improvement. BlackBerry did the total opposite. BlackBerry could have been a dominant player today. They could have owned the business market. Like IBM owns like PCs own and Microsoft owns the business market. They could have owned the business market. That's a huge marketplace, and allowed Apple to be the fun toy for consumers. And people would have had their iPhone at home and their BlackBerry for work. I mean, it's what would have happened, but they didn't. They got spooked, and a company with a great product and could have had a great cause abandoned their cause because they tried to beat Apple. I know exactly how those meetings went. Probably, well, I don't know exactly. I can pretty much take a really good guess, which is they had some focus groups and they had some research that says people really love iPhones and people really love touchscreens. Oh my God, that's what people want. That's where we should go. That makes you a follower, not a leader. If you stand for something, make a product that advances that stand. If it involves that tech, fine, but it doesn't have to. Cause blindness, I think, is something, unfortunately, that is rampant today, because our nation, and so unfortunately, this is not just the United States, has become so polarized that we become so obsessed with the thing that we're into, even if it's fundamentally a noble thing, that we literally become unable to see the points of view of other people. That by paying a compliment to somebody we consider our rival makes someone angry. I see this in politics all the time. I'll sit down with Republicans and say, you know what Democrats are better at than you? And they get angry at me. And I say to Democrats, you know what Republicans are better at than you? And they get angry at me. And they're morons. Because at the end of the day, it's not about beating the other side. It's about advancing the greater good. As opposed to saying, you're right, we can improve. We can get better at this, or we can get better at that. It's the same for every one of us. And we have to be aware of our own cause blindness. Like if somebody pays somebody that we find morally repugnant a compliment, are we able, instead of knee-jerk reaction and saying, they're an idiot, you're an idiot, to simply say, tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me how you come to that conclusion. Tell me what you think. Curiosity is a powerful thing. And the belief that we don't have all the answers and we're not always right. And sometimes it's very often our interpretation of what someone's saying. We label people as opposed to labeling behaviors. And this comes, I think, from this cause blindness. We become holier than thou, overly moral. The other part of this chapter that just is really important, I think, is that Cold War 2.0 is alive and well. I originally had this as pages and pages and pages. It was like this big, thick chapter about Cold War 2.0. And I pulled it all out, unfortunately, because I realized that except for like me and 4 other people, it was probably boring reading. I can condense it down in just about, I think, 3 pages. But it makes the point that that in an infinite game, you have to consider who's playing and what game they're in. And you have to consider what's the appropriate adjustment to the play. And the fact of the matter is the Cold War and global politics is always a Cold War. It's always an infinite game, I mean. And players come and go. The Roman Empire no longer exists. The Ottoman Empire no longer exists. The British Empire, Britain exists. The empire doesn't exist. This happens. Players come and players go. There's new countries. There's countries that don't exist anymore. Abyssinia doesn't exist anymore, been replaced. And the point is that how we show up to the game is really, really important. Though there are finite components, we have to remember to stay in that infinite game. I could say more about it, but this is your time. So why don't we do some questions? Let's see. I could take some live ones. Let me do one that was mailed in. Here we go from Courtney Harry. New York City, yay, New York. How can you have a healthy competitive spirit and still play with an infinite mindset? So again, there's nothing wrong with competition. It just depends the game you're in, right? So if you're playing a finite game, you should show up to win. You should show up to beat the competitor. That's the game you're in. And so a healthy competitive spirit is perfectly fine. I'm competitive, but it's also adjusting our mindset. So when I'm in an infinite scenario, I stop thinking about winning or being number one, and I start thinking about advancing. So for me, the competitive spirit with an infinite mindset is I need to advance. I need to push. I need to go further. And the metrics are variable, and so you have to be very careful about the metrics you're using. So for example, I may be all high and mighty because I have more Instagram followers than one of my rivals, but I have a look at Twitter, they're like 4 times more than me. And so sometimes we can, if we get into this too much of this competitive mind set, it can make us feel great or make us feel bad, depending on what metric we're looking at. The infinite mindset is finding the metrics that help you measure the thing you're trying to do. What does that mean? Okay, so let's use social media, for example. Let's use Twitter. I actually don't care how many followers on Twitter I have. Everybody cares how many followers you have. I don't care. The thing that I care about on my Twitter is the retweets. That's what I care about. I don't, even the comments, it's the retweets for me, that's the number I care about most. That when I put something up there, for me, it's about spreading a message. It's about sharing a gospel. That's what I care about inspiration and safety and fulfillment. And so when I put something up there, and somebody thinks that it's valuable enough for them to share it with their friends coming from them, not just saying they like it to me, which is just a dialogue between two, but rather that they take it upon themselves to share this work, to say, hey, this is something that I want to say too, that means my work has value. So for me, the thing that I care about most are retweets. So since I learned that, there are people that used to intimidate me because they had millions more followers, but I started to notice that the shares were different. And so I realized that's my metric, not in comparison to others, only in comparison to myself. I only care about my shares relative to me. So you can absolutely be healthy with a healthy competitive spirit. When you're in the finite game, you're competing against your competitor. When you're in an infinite game, you're competing against yourself. Be competitive with yourself, Courtney.
Here's a good one that just came in.
Yes.
Tish Tamaz.
Tish Tamaz with a question, yes.
Cause blindness is such a prevalent issue as you described. What techniques do you recommend that I can use to help my organization realize that we are
cause blind? Tish asks, cause blindness is so prevalent. What techniques can I offer that when he recognizes that his organization suffers from cause blindness, what can he do? Well, cause blindness means that we're super competitive, right? So put it in competitive terms. You can do a whole presentation on this. You can do a PowerPoint on it, saying how are we going to? And you can use finite language, right? You can be clever in how you do this. How are we going to dominate? How will we win? You can use that term if it appeals to the people in the room. We know what we're trying to do here. How can we win? And then we say, if we want to win, we have to be better than our competition. Use all these finite terms, right? And one of the best ways to be better than our competition is to be honest about where we can improve. A great way to find out where we can improve is to look at where our competition is better than us. So it's coming across as competitive stuff, but we're doing it in terms of self-improvement. And in the course of time, when people start to say, this is good, let's do another one of these, then you can start to gently change the language. Start referring to them as there are rivals, they're worthy of comparison. We started looking to other markets, even outside our own industry, to see who else should we be comparing ourselves to so that we can be better and identify our weaknesses. So we might be in pharmaceutical or food distribution, who knows? And we're now looking at tech, at how good they do things. We're now looking at some charities, how good they are at communicating. For example, I don't care how big or successful company you are, look at Charity Water for their branding. Their branding is 1,000 times better than most companies. Go admire them, go learn from them. The point is you can start to filter it in and start to broaden the aperture, and then you can start using different language, like how do we advance, how do we continually grow, and the word beat them and win starts to go away. Do you have another question? Otherwise, I can take one from Jordan Harper here.
Okay.
Jordan Harper, how can we create synergy amongst a team where competition among team members is present, but we're also serving each other and the bigger cause. Tough question there, only because I don't understand all the variables. When you say that there's competition among members, is it friendly competition because you're all friends, or is it competition because leadership has made you compete against each other? There's a difference, because I don't want to get into a semantic debate, because sometimes it's rivalry and we just call it friendly competition. That's what we usually, when we say friendly competition, what we usually mean is rivalry. So if it's put upon us by leadership, that's when it can start to be dangerous, because when we are told that we are only incentivized by, you see this in sales structures, and especially if we're not have divided territories, if we have shared territories, we might hoard information as opposed to sharing information, and this becomes eventually destructive to the organization. And so if you want to serve each other with a bigger cause, and if it doesn't exist in leadership, if leadership hasn't given you that bigger cause, be the leader you wish you had. Next time you show up to a meeting, interrupt and say, guys, can I tell you why I love this company? Can I tell you why I show up to work every day? I have a belief. I have a vision of a world that does not yet exist. Share your cause. And I come to work every day because this is the world I want to do. And what I love about coming to work every day is that we are advancing the cause based on how we do work. And basically what you're doing is you're inspiring the team. You're giving them something to believe in. Some of them may think you're crazy and stupid, and two of them will come up to you and be like, that's really good. I feel the same way. And that starts to become a cohort of friendly competition of worthy rivals. The Young Living Malaysia Book Club. Good morning to you. It's wee hours of the morning there, isn't it? Can we be our own worthy rival? Interesting. I always think we need to be better than who we were last week or yesterday. I'm going to go with no on that one. And I'll tell you why. Because we can only have as much perspective on ourselves. Like as individuals, none of us truly knows how others perceive us. We think we know how we're perceived, but we don't always know. Every single one of us has blind spots. Sometimes we say things and we think we were perfectly polite. Turns out we were really rude. We didn't even know it. Sometimes we thought we were really rude. We start apologizing. Everybody's like, what are you talking about? It's fine. So I think to be your own worthy rival, there's nothing to compare. I think being introspective, being able to take a hard look at yourself and be able to say, oh, that's not good, I can do better, but you still can only see the things that you can see. So yes, continue to do that. The whole point of worthy rivalry is that it helps identify the things you can't see. That's the point of worthy rivalry. It's the stuff that makes you uncomfortable. And of course, once identified, to your point, then you got to work on it. So the worthy rival is the revealer, and then you got to be honest with yourself to do the hard work. Once it's revealed, you got to be honest about it. Good question.
There are a few questions coming in here about how do you prevent from becoming obsessed with beating your worthy rival?
Okay, a bunch of questions that came in. I love this. How do you avoid becoming obsessed? Sorry, how do you avoid becoming obsessed, so not being obsessed with beating your worthy rival? Do you see what we just did there? We used finite language in an infinite scenario. You're not supposed to beat your worthy rivals. You're supposed to study and admire them. You beat competition. But I'm parsing words. I speak in idealized terms. Don't get me wrong. And the reality is that having, I don't want to call them an enemy, but somebody who believes different things is fantastic for rallying people, especially if you're the underdog. And for years, IBM, then Microsoft, was a great rallying thing for Apple to bring people together. Same with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a great way to bring people together because, and I'm uncomfortable with this, but I've been literally looking at this for years, hoping to undo this theory. And I have a theory that's very uncomfortable, which is because talking about what we stand for is very abstract very often, which is why visionary leaders are really important, because what those visionary leaders do is they take an abstract vision and put it into words that feel tangible so that we can see what they can see, right? And the example that I always like to use, because it's such a good example, Dr. King. I have a dream, intangible, imagination, that one day, little black children will be holding hands on the playground with little white children, right? Now it's an image that I can imagine and I can see it myself. And that's really important. But the problem is it still lives in abstraction. What doesn't live in abstraction is the competition and the other companies or the other things that others are doing. And sometimes it really helps us to know what we stand for. Unfortunately, it makes me so uncomfortable when we can see what we're against, right? It's easier to identify that we stand for inclusion when we see acts of racism, because it is so abhorrent and so upsetting to us that we don't want to be like that. When a mirror is held up, or when we see something that we don't like, or we don't trust, or we don't agree with, then it's easier for us to know what we stand for. Because very often, because leadership is so sometimes messy and convoluted, that these things fail just the words. So, I'm uncomfortable with it, but sometimes identifying someone who has a different vision than us is helpful. But the point is, we're not trying to beat them. That's the nuance. We just want to advance our cause, and ultimately, it's what benefited the West in the Cold War, which is we didn't know what beating the Soviet Union looked like. We couldn't even imagine what that looked like. We used the term, we're going to beat the Soviet Union all the time, but nobody actually knew what it meant. But what it did do is it pushed us to advance our own things more and more and more. And I think it is not a coincidence that the fall of the Berlin Wall and how finite we've become are just intertwined, because we no longer had that check. Anyway, I could go on. I tend to too much.
This is an interesting question that Patricia Holob
Patricia, what was the last name?
Holob.
Patricia Holob.
How do you build a healthy relationship with someone who considers you their worthy rival and works to undermine you instead of working together? Okay. How do you work with someone who considers you their worthy rival and works to undermine you instead of working together? Then they don't consider you their worthy rival. Then they consider you their competitor. So somebody who's working to undermine you doesn't consider you a worthy rival, because they're not looking at themselves, having the uncomfortable conversation with themselves, just like the Young Living Malaysia Book Club asked. It's about looking at yourself. Once that worthy rival is, and they're not trying to make themselves better, they're trying to take you down. Or the only way they can advance themselves is by pulling you back. And so have a conversation with them. And don't have a conversation of criticism. Have a conversation of worthy rivalry. One day when you're sitting with them, say, can I just tell you something? You can do what I did with Adam Grant. I didn't know what he was going to say. I didn't know what he thought. I didn't know that he had those feelings about me. For all I knew, he ignored me and never thought about me ever. It was the difficult where I leaned over and said, can I be honest with you? You make me really insecure, because all of your strengths are all of my weaknesses. And every time you do something, I get really uncomfortable because you're just so good at what you do. And I'm starting to realize that if I continue to see that way, I don't want to do anything to hurt you, but I'm realizing that I need to be honest with myself, that I need to up my game, and I want to work myself. So as uncomfortable as it is, I want to thank you. The point is, if you're basically pointing out the things that you're critical of in them, but you're doing it on yourself. So because they can't criticize anything you're saying about yourself, but as soon as you start accusing them of something or pointing things out, it could get depending on the relationship, it can get very adversarial. If you have a great relationship, you can say, hey, I can help you. But if it's not that kind of relationship, talk about yourself in the same context. It's really, really helpful. And sometimes you get through. And then don't reciprocate. Don't try and undermine them. Don't believe in revenge. It doesn't get you anywhere, because it just takes you down into the finite game. Let them play the finite game. You stay above the fray. This is what I've tried to point out in this book multiple times. America got stuck in the quagmire of Vietnam because they were playing a finite game and the North Vietnamese were playing an infinite game. This has happened multiple times. It happens. This is Apple was playing the infinite game. BlackBerry is playing the finite game. It's the finite player that eventually goes into quagmire. So do not play their finite game. Do not go down in those depths. Even if they don't play with infinite mindset, you play with infinite mindset. Okay, moving on. Gabrielle Wanless from Pepper Pike, Ohio. Did you move there? Because it's fun to say. Pepper Pike. How does an infinite-minded company deal with ethical dilemmas, such as putting procedures into place for the protection of all stakeholders, but not completely upholding them in circumstances where it is more efficient or sensible to follow a different procedure?
I have yet to see a procedure that includes the phrase or use your common sense. Boy, I really hope that you find yourself in a leadership position at that organization sometime soon. But you talk about an infinite-minded company. Oh, I apologize. I think the way you're doing it right now, which is to have this honest conversation. If you're an infinite-minded organization, which you say you are, and there are ethical dilemmas, point it out. Say, hey guys, in our infinite pursuit, I have noticed. Remember, infinite-mindedness means we're obsessed with constant improvement. And so an organization, if they are truly infinite-minded, they want to hear this stuff. Our organization, we screw things up all the time, But the point is we go back and we look and say, okay, infinite-minded, what can we do better? How can we change? Are we doing this right? We prefer to err on the side of making slightly slower decisions so we can get the perspective right. Have the conversation. I have noticed, and start adding or use your common sense. By saying or use your common sense also does something wonderful. It communicates to the people in the organization that we trust you. We trust you to use your judgment. Our job as leadership is to lay down a foundation of values. This is a value-based organization. And if you work within our values, then we ask you to use your common sense. I'll tell you a funny story that goes back many, many years for my group. So we believe in integrity and honesty, like so many others, right? But it has to be pervasive all the time. Very hard to do. So, true story. I had a very important phone call with all the leadership of a big government agency. It was like very exciting. And I forgot. I just forgot. So I didn't show up on the phone call, on the conference call. And I had all these senior leaders from a big government agency waiting on the phone for me. And no one could get hold of me because who knows what I was doing. I just forgot. And so my assistant at the time, in well-intentioned, with only noble heart, made an excuse for me. And she said, terribly sorry, Simon got caught in another meeting. And I'm so grateful for her for covering me, but we had a conversation and I said, you can't say that because that's not true. That's a lie. And we can't lie, even if you're trying to help me out. Now, what you can say is, terribly sorry, Simon missed the call. Can we reschedule it? That's fine. That's true. But we can't add that little lie. And we only had to have the conversation once. And now she had guideposts on how to navigate. And the point is the same, which is we give people guideposts and then we let them make their own choices. This is really, really important. Or use common sense. I think is so great. I wish people added it in their manuals, their employee manuals all the time, because all procedures are imperfect. We don't trust people to follow rules. We trust people to know when to break them. Giving away company product is not a good idea. When we wrong a customer and we give away something, we give them a free meal to say sorry for the slow service. You don't have to ask management for that. In fact, I had a conversation with one of the managers at the Four Seasons. And he was telling me that they've empowered their frontline staff. They empower any employee to know when to give things away. So any server is empowered to give away a drink or a dessert or sometimes even a meal if they feel it's appropriate. They don't have to ask management. And what he told me is that when management was involved, he found out that the frontline staff is actually a lot stingier because they're so protective and so grateful for the responsibility that they've given that they wield it with great responsibility, like I said. And Barry Waymiller, Bob Chapman calls this responsible freedom. We give you responsible freedom. I love that term. We don't give you freedom. We give you responsible freedom. You have freedom to conduct your business responsibly. And so I think that's what you have to do. Give people responsible freedom. Okay, I've definitely over-answered that question. I will try and give shorter answers. I apologize. It's a bad habit. Dum, 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 dum.
Here's a good one about ethical dating. Stan Levitan from the All of One Book Club.
Stan Levitan from the All of One Book Club.
How do you prevent an ethical fade from happening or stop one that is already propagating before it's too late and you're in a full-blown scandal?
Okay, how do you stop ethical fading from happening or propagating? Okay, so an infinite mindset, as I talk about, doesn't prevent ethical lapses, but it is an insurance policy against ethical fading, because an infinite-minded organization is a value-based organization. And you may have a meeting and somebody may propose an idea that would make the company way more profitable. Like, what if we raised our prices 1,000%? And they wouldn't be able to say no because we have the patent. and they need our drug and they have no choice. Wouldn't that be great? And somebody in the room goes, guys, that's kind of not the way we do business. That's not how we do things. But if you're starting to see more and more ethical lapses, and the important thing about ethical fading is it's becoming normalized, that unethical behavior is becoming normalized. It's just the system. Everyone does it. What's the harm? It's good for us. Mind your own business. All of these things. There's a few questions you need to ask. Can you have conversations with leadership to make them aware of it? This is where whistleblowers come out, I'm afraid. It gets to the point where if the ethical fading has taken such hold of the organization that you can no longer have rational conversations with anybody, then sometimes if it's at the scandal level, what scandal is it has become uncontrollable and no one's taking any responsibility, and leadership is completely blind, if not complicit in this charade. But start by having difficult conversations, and don't make them accusations. Because when you start to accuse people, what do? If I were to accuse you of something, what do? You're going to dig your heels in, right? You're going to counter accuse me, right? But rather come in as somebody who cares. In other words, hey boss, can I have an uncomfortable conversation with you? Okay, we're setting up that this is going to be uncomfortable. We like that. I love starting conversations that are going to be difficult by telling everybody this is going to be uncomfortable or difficult. I need to have a difficult conversation with you. I don't even know how to say it. I don't even know how to put it, but I'm really worried because I'm starting to see these behaviors. Use these concepts. Hold up, bring in a paper about ethical fading and say, I read about this thing called ethical fading, and I have a very uncomfortable feeling that that's us. Because as I read this, I saw us. Can we just talk about this? That I think we're getting to the point where we're acting so unethically that eventually, we're in the bounds of the law. No, I'm not saying we did anything illegal. I'm saying, are we doing anything unethical? I'm raising the question. So that's what I would recommend. Let's do one here. We have a little bit time left. We'll do a little bit more here. Oh, I love this one. Wait, you have the Carrot Souffle Club, the Carrot Souffle Book Club. You're not talking about my mom's carrot souffle recipe, are you? My mom makes the best carrot souffle. Comes out every Thanksgiving. I really should make it any other time. It's kind of like, what are the sweet potatoes with marshmallows? It's like, why don't I make that all year round? I don't, once a year. Carrot souffle, I should make it all the time. I don't, I make it once a year. Anyway, we will post my mom's recipe for carrot souffle in the various social media because it's amazing. Sorry, Mom. I think you're probably listening. We're gonna give the game away. Okay, so Rakesha Rue and Denise Crawley from the Carrot Souffle Book Club ask, what do you do when you recognize the value of a worthy rival and what they bring to the table, but they do not recognize your organization's value? Who cares? The whole point of worthy rivalry is that you are using them to reveal your weaknesses. Who cares what they think? Apple saw IBM as a worthy rival. IBM did not see Apple as a worthy rival. Netflix saw Blockbuster as a worthy rival. Blockbuster ignored Netflix. It does not matter because you're not competing against them. Your only competitor in the game is yourself. And we wish all the other players the best of luck. That's the hardest thing to remember. You are not competing against them. You are competing with them. The only competitor is yourself. So you may see them as a worthy rival. If they don't see you as one, who cares? Everybody gets to choose their own worthy rivals. Sometimes it'll be mutual. Sometimes it won't. John Smith from the UK. I think, was it in the 1950s or 60s in the UK where 60% of men were named John? It was a ridiculous number. Anyway, Jonathan Smith from the UK. Regarding the concept of a worthy rival, I struggle a little since we live in a dog-eat-dog world. Boy, do we. Where losing a contract could mean the foreclosing of a business. Could. Is the concept of a worthy rival therefore a luxury that can be afforded to those from some form of financial or personal security? Absolutely not. The whole point of worthy rival doesn't mean that you can't still play the dog-eat-dog world if the stakes are that high, but it's about improving the quality of how you do business. A worthy rival it doesn't mean you become complacent. It's not all kumbaya and sit on the top of a mountain in lotus position thinking about how other players play the game. That's not what it's about. You can be competitive, you can be hard-nosed, you can do all those things. The whole point of worthy rivalry is to recognize and respect that others do things better than you. Fact. Big things or little things, one thing or multiple things. Others do things better than you. And the point of worthy rivalry is to say, we can do better there. Let's improve what we do. Not with the intention of beating them, with the intention of being better at what we do. It just so happens that if you get really good at what you do, you tend to outperform your competition. And this is what I find ironic. Those organizations that are infinite-minded tend to, on a regular basis over time, outperform their competitors. Patagonia, Barry Waymiller, Southwest Airlines, all of these, Costco, all of these companies that maintain an infinite mindset, on average, outperform their competition on a regular basis over time. So the thing that we struggle with is that finite-mindedness is about seeing results on a predictable scale. One of the reasons a lot of people and organizations either struggle to understand the infinite mindset, struggle to convert to an infinite mindset, or downright refuse to convert to an infinite mindset is, I don't know how long it takes. No one does. So will you start showing greater performance in the traditional metrics with an infinite mindset? 100%. When? A year? 6 months? 2 years? It tends to go more quickly as time goes because you become better at things, you become more skilled. But that's what makes people really uncomfortable, which is the time frames are unpredictable. It is infinite. It doesn't mean it takes an infinite amount of time. It means the time frames are unpredictable, which if you're an infinite-minded person, that's okay. And it's something you can practice. Okay, we're going to do one more question. How about this one from Takashi Onaga from the Book Club of Two. Still a book club. And I like that you called it the Book Club of Two. Okay, Takashi. Do you have to personally know your worthy rival? Can it be a historical person? Oh, that's good. That's very, very good. Well, let me break it down based on how I've written the rules. You get to pick whoever you want as your worthy rivals. That's what the instructions say. The instructions say you can pick whoever you want. And you can have as many as you want, and they can change. So I guess then yes. My gut says you probably want to have some real life ones as well. But I think yes, to go back in history and say, I admire the way that person did things, and I know I can do better, and I use them as a model and a pacer. If I watch their work, it makes me uncomfortable. I realize I have so much more work to do. Yes, I think you can have historical figures as worthy rivals. Absolutely. Boy, did this go quicker than usual?
So fast.
Like we're doing the same amount of time that we always do book club, and it feels like we just got started. This is crazy how quickly this went. Is it just me? Or is it you too? It's a little too quick. Next week. Okay, I shall do a little wrap-up summary, shouldn't I? Okay, so ethical fading, it's a real thing. It's more pervasive than we'd like to admit. A lot of organizations, even good ones, probably have a little bit of it. Most important thing is to point it out, especially before it becomes full-blown. As we've learned from the previous question, once it becomes full-blown, I mean, nothing short of a scandal or a whistleblower is probably going to stop it. But when it's starting to show its ugly little head, we can probably nip it in the bud if we can point it out, because rational minds will still prevail there. So watch out for it. It's a real thing. Again, it's not about ethical lapses. It's about when ethical lapses become normalized and accepted. And worthy rivals. It's one of the thing that I love about worthy rival. It is, of all of the practices of an infinite mindset, it is the easiest one to do. It's the easiest one to embrace. It's the easiest one to do. So if you're trying to embrace this thing called an infinite mindset, start with the easy one. Really embrace the concept of worthy rivalry. Have those conversations with people. If they're on your team, be like, hey, you make me real uncomfortable because all of your strengths are all my weaknesses, and I've realized I've been really competitive with you, and I realize how stupid that is, because what I really should be saying is thank you. Like, go have those conversations if there are people on your team. It's the easiest one to embrace. Next week, we'll be back for our final Infinite Game Book Club on Friday, August 7th at 1 p.m. Eastern. You know what? I just had an idea. I haven't told this to my team yet. It's a spontaneous idea. I like book clubs so much. So we're going to do, next week will not be the final one. It'll be the penultimate one. We're going to do a bonus book club after we're done reading The Infinite Game. I think we should read Together is Better. Why not? It's such a joyful little book. I don't know, probably do it in one session where we can talk about some of the quotes in there. So if you want another book to read with your team, and if you like the smell optimism, check out Together is Better, and we'll figure out the date. Maybe it'll be the following week, but we'll let you know on social media. So because I'm enjoying this too much. And I love that little book, and I haven't read it in a while, even though it takes 10 minutes to read. Okay, so the final Infinite Game Book Club will be next Friday, August 7th, 1 p.m. Eastern, same bat time, same bat channel. We're going to be on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, covering chapters 10 and 11, existential flexibility, the courage to lead. I think these two are so important for the times we're living in now. Existential flexibility is something that so many organizations are forced to go through right now, and boy, do we need the courage to lead in these times. So that will be a robust discussion, I expect, next week. Next week, I also have another little surprise guest. Remember, we had Rich Davini, so I have a little guest next week. You'll find out who it is. Somebody to talk about the courage to maintain an infinite mindset in their organization, because they're trying to do it, and it's fun to watch. Remember, send your questions and photos of you and your book club with your books to bookclub@simonsinek.com. Submit your questions in advance to bookclub@simonsinek.com. If you want to rewatch this or share it with a friend or colleague who was unable to make it, all of these, this will be reposted on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So feel free to go back and re-listen to an answer if you'd like. We also have some new classes up on simonsinek.com/inspireyou. One of them, we told you about Rich Davini's class. Really excited about that one. Rich, former Navy SEAL who knows a lot about trust. And I actually learned the whole trust versus performance from Rich. He was the director of training, I think that was his title, for a specialized group within the Navy SEALs. So knows a lot about that stuff. And he's teaching a how to build trust class. Is that what it's called? I don't know what it's called.
Yep, Build Trusted Teams.
It's called Build Trusting Teams. I think it's run already once. Mm-hmm. It's run once, and we got great reviews. I'm very proud of that. We've had a lot of emails saying, so check out his new class. And Andrea Garfield and the Awesome Institute, I think theirs is going up soon too. I don't know if you saw it.
They had their first yesterday.
They had their first one yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. I've been struggling with COVID, like a lot of people, feeling much better. Thank you very much for asking. And Andrea is an amazing coach who understands how to deal with feelings. And I called her, and just because I thought I didn't know what was going to happen, I hit record, and I shared that recording on YouTube of how to deal with feelings. We've asked Andrea to come and teach a class for us on how to deal with our feelings. She's been a huge help to me. Hopefully she can help you too. Check her out as well. And I think is our discount code still live?
Yep.
If you want to go take any of those classes or any others, we have a discount code just for book club. Use book club rules. All one word, book club rules. Get 20% off any of the classes. Enjoy that. Have fun with that. Andrea and Scott from the Awesome Institute, right? And we have another class that's brand new called Turn Adversity into an Advantage from Harvard School professor Laura Huang. Also getting great reviews. Really proud of that class. So check them out if you want. Otherwise, I will see you next week. And remember, book club is not about the book. It's about doing something together. It's about community and taking care of each other. And on that note, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you next week.